Rich bully called her Ghetto trash. She flipped him in front of the whole school. She doesn't belong here. People like her never do. Those were the first words Amira Thompson heard, echoing down the marble-floored hallway of Westbrook Academy just seconds before her homeroom teacher slid the door shut. It was only her second week at the elite prep school, tucked in a wealthy Boston suburb, and she was already a ghost in the system spoken about not to. Her mother, a night shift nurse, had called this scholarship a miracle. Amira called it exile. She walked the halls like she was made of glass, trying not to reflect too much, trying not to shatter. Being black in a school full of children with last names on buildings was a performance she never auditioned for. But this Tuesday morning, everything changed. She was reaching into her locker, carefully tucking away her secondhand textbooks, when she felt it a tug, then a rip. Her shirt split at the seam, loud and violent, revealing the faded tank underneath. Laughter exploded around her like fireworks. Logan Whitmore, the golden-haired quarterback with a Rolex and a legacy admission, held the torn fabric in his hand like a trophy. Phones were already recording. "Thought we were doing a dress code inspection," he said mock serious. "Didn't realize Goodwill had uniforms." Amira didn't move. 8 years of judo training kept her spine aligned, her breathing slow. Her sensei's first rule had been clear: never start a fight, but always know how to finish one. That restraint had kept her quiet and visible for too long. She blinked, scanned the hall. No teachers, just Blake and Cody snickering behind Logan, one holding a phone, the other already crafting the meme caption. She clutched the strap of her bag, now slipping off her shoulder from this commotion, and turned to face him. "You done?" Logan blinked, clearly not expecting a response. "Sorry, you need permission to speak here." "No," she said evenly. "I just figured you'd run out of recycled insults by now." Blake let out an exaggerated "ah," while Cody's camera zoomed in. Logan's smirk faltered. "Careful, scholarship. You talk like that and you might forget your place." Amira exhaled through her nose. She wouldn't snap. Not here. Not yet. When the first period bell rang, she walked to class like nothing had happened, but inside her bones were humming. Every instinct screamed for justice, but she knew justice wasn't something girls like her received. She'd learned to swallow anger like pills, small bitter daily. But this time, something shifted. At lunch, she sat in her usual corner alone until Ava Chen from STEM Club quietly slid into the seat across from her. "I saw what they did," Ava said. "It's not the first time, but it's the first time someone looked Logan in the eye afterward." Amira looked up. "What do you mean?" "You didn't shrink. Most of us shrink, but you didn't?" Ava placed something on the table, a small round pin. Judo kanji etched into the surface. "You dropped this." Amira's breath caught. It was her father's old dojo pin stitched to her bag's inside seam. Must have fallen in the struggle. She touched it gently, grounding herself. "You train?" Ava asked. "Since I was 9. "Then maybe it's time someone flipped the story around here." Amira didn't answer, but as she pinned the dojo symbol back to her bag, her fingers trembled. Not from fear. From the possibility that maybe, just maybe, silence wasn't her only option. And the next day, when Logan and his crew struck again, they found out just how wrong they'd been. "What's the matter? Scholarship forgot your food stamps today." Logan's voice rang out across the early morning hallway, smooth and toxic. Amira had arrived earlier than usual, hoping for a quiet start. Instead, she found the lock on her locker snapped off the door, swinging open like a crime scene. Her books were soaked pages torn and dripping with chocolate milk. A tattered t-shirt lay in the mess, crusted and stained. Her extra gym clothes ruined. Blake laughed, holding an empty milk carton. Cody stood nearby, filming again. "This is content gold," he muttered, adjusting the camera angle. Logan stepped closer, his sneakers crunching against wet notebook paper. "Oops," he said with mock concern. "Looks like we had a little spill." Amira stood still, every breath measured. Her eyes flicked to the ground, then back to Logan. Her heartbeat was slow, deliberate. The pin on her backpack glinted under the flickering hallway lights. You gonna cry now? Or maybe call the school therapist? Logan grinned, stepping into her space. Or maybe you need a little reminder of where you stand. He reached out again toward her face this time. That was it. Her hand shot up swift and precise, catching his wrist before his fingers could reach her skin. A gasp escaped him. She squeezed, finding the pressure point below his thumb. He dropped to one knee, eyes wide. I said, she whispered, her voice cool as steel, don't touch me. Cody lowered his phone, stunned. Bro, she's doing ninja stuff? Blake stepped forward, but froze when Amira didn't move. Logan tried to jerk free, throwing a wild punch with his free hand. Amira released him, pivoted on one heel, and, with a single controlled motion, redirected his momentum. Her hip caught his center of gravity, and before anyone could blink, Logan Whitmore, football star, golden boy, untouchable prince of Westbrook, was flying. He hit the floor with a thunderous crack. A silence louder than any scream filled the hallway. Students who had begun trickling in stood frozen. Cody's phone was still rolling. Amira stepped back, hands loose at her sides, breath steady. 8 years of judo, she said softly, her voice carrying. My sensei always said, use their weight against them. The bigger they are, the harder they fall. She paused, looking down at Logan, now gasping for air on the floor. Guess he was right. Blake rushed to his friend, babbling about lawsuits, but no one was listening. Marcus Ling, student council, VP, and captain of the debate team, pushed through the crowd. I saw everything. That was self-defense. Clear as day. Logan groaned. Do you know who my dad is? Yeah, Amira said, crouching beside him, her tone still composed. So, do all the cameras. And just like that, the silence shattered. Students began clapping, whispering, filming. Something had shifted. Not just in that hallway, in all of them. A reckoning was coming. And it had started with a pin, a choice, and a perfectly executed hip throw. But the battle wasn't over. Not even close. Do you know who my father is? That question should have been a threat. Instead, it became the first nail in Logan Whitmore's golden coffin. The moment Amira stepped back, after flipping him, breathing steady and calm, the power balance at Westbrook cracked audibly, visibly, irrevocably. Students stared, phones still recording. Logan, the prince of privilege, lay sprawled on the floor, his ego bruised worse than his body. And Amira. She didn't even flinch. Within minutes, the footage hit social media. Students whispered, then texted, then reposted. By the time first period ended, Schacher's scholarship throw trended locally. Someone slowed the video, adding dramatic music and captions. He reached for her. She reached for gravity. At lunch, Amira returned to her usual table, but it wasn't empty anymore. Ava was there, along with Marcus Ling and 2 other students she only knew by face. They weren't just there to eat. They were rallying. You're a legend, Marcus said, sliding a tray beside her. Not because of the throw, because you didn't break him. That restraint, that was next level. Amira blinked. I just defended myself. Exactly, Ava added. You didn't escalate, you exposed. The cafeteria buzzed. Eyes glanced her way, not with scorn, but reverence. A freshman even approached with a hushed, thank you, before scampering away. It was surreal. The silence she used to hide in had become a spotlight, and that spotlight brought shadows. Later that afternoon, Amira was called to the principal's office. Her pulse spiked. She walked through halls that felt different, watchful, charged. She found Principal Reynolds waiting with Vice Principal Simmons and a lawyer she didn't recognize. Her mom was already seated, eyes fierce, despite her tired scrubs. Amira, Principal Reynolds said gently, we need to discuss what happened this morning. Amira recounted the incident clearly, calmly. When they played the video, no one spoke. The moment Logan reached for her, the footage froze. Every detail lined up. Her calm, his aggression. Her control, his collapse. We've reviewed the video and spoken to witnesses, the lawyer said finally. This is textbook self-defense. But the but hung in the air like a guillotine. Logan's father is claiming excessive force, Simmons added. They're exploring legal action. Amira's mother gripped her hand. You're not punishing her for protecting herself. Not again. We're not, Reynolds said firmly. In fact, we're releasing a statement affirming Amira's right to safety. It was more than Amira had expected, but also not enough. Not yet. As they left the office, Simmons leaned closer. There may be fallout. They'll go public. They always do. That night, Amira couldn't sleep. She stared at the dojo pin, twisting it between her fingers. Her dad used to call it her compass. Now, it was her armor. She hadn't just defended herself, she'd lit a fuse. And by morning, the explosion hit. A press video surfaced, Logan sitting stiffly in a staged office, a neck brace awkwardly fastened. I never meant to hurt anyone, he said solemnly, but I was violently attacked. I could have suffered serious injury. Amira nearly choked. Logan injured. He tried to slap her. Now he was playing victim. They're spinning it, Marcus texted. Damage control mode, but it's not working. People are pissed. Indeed, the backlash was immediate. Comments flooded in from former students, current classmates, even strangers who had seen the footage. Stories poured out, Logan destroying someone's project, humiliating a kid in gym, spreading rumors. Patterns emerged. Power abused. Stories that were once silenced now had a megaphone, but not everyone was cheering. Anonymous accounts defended Logan, claiming Amira was violent, dangerous, even weaponized. Racial undertones seeped in. She's trained to hurt people. Should she be allowed in schools? Amira felt the familiar sting of erasure, that her dignity had to be earned, while others had theirs by default. Even when you win, you're questioned. Even when you're right, you're doubted. But the next morning, something shifted again. Students wore pins, her dojo pin. Ava had 3D printed dozens. Some pinned them to backpacks, others to shirts. Marcus stood by the front steps handing them out. You started something, he said. Amira wanted to smile, but her stomach knotted. She saw Logan watching from across the quad. No neck brace today. Just eyes full of fury and something else fear. She passed him without a word, but inside she knew the real battle hadn't begun. They'd tried silence, then humiliation, now manipulation. And next, they'd come for her future. You're being removed from school property effective immediately. The words struck Amira like a slap. Principal Reynolds' office, once a place of reluctant tolerance, now felt like an interrogation chamber. Flanked by 2 uniformed officers and a woman in a navy blazer who introduced herself as Patricia Morse, legal counsel for the Whitmore family, the room pulsed with tension. Her mother sat beside her jaw, tight eyes already blazing. Amira's breath caught. For what self-defense? For what Logan suffered? Morse countered, sliding a glossy tablet across the desk. These are medical documents. Contusions, possible nerve damage. You executed a dangerous maneuver with martial arts training you failed to disclose. That's reckless endangerment. She defended herself against assault, Reynolds interjected. And we have video footage that supports that? You have video of a trained fighter flipping a student onto tile flooring. Morse snapped. That's excessive force. Amira looked to Officer Medina, the younger, kinder cop from the day before, who hesitated before speaking. Ma'am, the video shows Amira responding after being grabbed. Her response was measured. No sign of follow-up aggression. Patricia Morse's lips curled. The legal system may disagree. In the meantime, the Whitmore family is filing a formal restraining order and civil complaint. We demand she be removed, pending the investigation. Amira's mother rose. This is harassment, and if you think we're backing down because you brought lawyers instead of accountability, you're mistaken. Reynolds sighed. She's not being expelled, but until we clarify legal liabilities, she will be on administrative leave. Outside the hallway buzzed. Word had spread. Amira walked past rows of students watching, whispering. Some wore her dojo pin. Others held signs, "Let her learn," and "Justice for Amira." She didn't cry, not until they reached the parking lot and her mom pulled her into a hug. "I'm so sorry," her mom whispered. "I told you to keep your head down. But baby, you raised your head, and now the world's watching." That night, her story hit national headlines. Martial artist suspended after flipping classmate. News anchors dissected every angle. Social media ignited half condemning her as a threat, the other half hailing her as a hero. Hate flooded her inbox. Threats. Racist slurs. Demands she be expelled, deported, erased. But then something unexpected happened. A video statement surfaced this time not from her, but from students. Marcus led the charge. One by one, classmates stepped forward. She defended herself. "Logan terrorized people for years. We were afraid to speak up until now." A dozen voices, then 20, then 50. Sarah coordinated a protest. Monday morning, over 200 students marched to school wearing dojo pins and carrying signs. Parents joined. Former students wrote letters. Civil rights groups reached out. Her dojo in Chicago released a statement defending her restraint, praising her training. And then came the twist. Amira received a message from Logan. "I want to meet." Alone? Her fingers hovered over the screen. Every part of her said, "Don't trust him." But another voice, quieter her father's voice, said, "Knowing your enemy is part of the fight." So she agreed. Public space. Ava and Marcus sat nearby in plain view. Logan arrived not in a suit or with his usual swagger, but wearing a hoodie shadows under his eyes. He didn't sit right away. "I didn't come to fight or spin this. I came because I screwed up." Amira said nothing. "My dad's trying to make this about you being dangerous," he continued. "But the truth is I was. I am. I've been horrible to people. And when you flipped me, you didn't just knock me down. You showed everyone who I really am." A silence stretched between them, taut. "I want to tell the truth," he said finally. "Publicly. On record. My dad will hate it. He'll try to destroy me. But I need to do this." Amira stared at him. This wasn't a performance. He looked broken. Not beyond repair, but cracked enough to let truth in. "You do this right?" she said slowly. "Not for show. Not to erase what you did, but to start fixing it." "I will." As Logan left, Ava whispered, "You think he means it?" Amira clutched the pin on her jacket, the dojo symbol. "I don't know. But if he does, the narrative changes." And as she watched Logan walk away from the only world he'd ever ruled, she realized she hadn't just flipped a boy. She'd flipped a system. I was the bully. No one else. Just me. Logan's voice echoed off the stone steps of Crestwood High, trembling but loud enough for every student, teacher, and camera to hear. It was a crisp Monday morning, the kind that usually brought quiet yawns and routine, but today, silence reigned. The boy who once ruled these halls now stood alone, stripped of bravado, clutching a microphone like a lifeline. He wasn't wearing his varsity jacket, just a hoodie and the weight of his choices. I grabbed Amira. I mocked her. I vandalized her things. I tried to humiliate her because I thought I could, because I knew I could. And I've done it to others over and over, because no one ever stopped me. Because no one ever told me I was wrong. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Phones recorded every word. Amira stood in the back, flanked by Ava and Marcus. Her hands clenched tightly around the pin of her dojo, the symbol of honor she now wore like armor. "I want to make this right," Logan continued. "Not just for Amira, but for everyone I hurt. I'm leaving Crestwood. I'll finish senior year elsewhere in a program that includes counseling and service. But this school, it needs to change too. Because I'm not the only one who got away with things. I was just the loudest." When he finished, the silence held for a heartbeat too long, then applause began. Hesitant at first, then stronger. Not for redemption, but for truth. Amira watched as Logan stepped away from the mic and into the waiting arms of his mother, not his father, who hugged him like she'd been waiting to for years. Within hours, the video had gone viral. Local outlets picked it up, then national ones. Teen bully confesses on camera, The headlines read. But the real shift wasn't online. It was in the school itself. Principal Reynolds called an emergency assembly. In the gym, he stood beside Miss Carter and the district superintendent, introducing a new initiative, a student-led integrity council, anti-bullying measures with actual teeth, safe reporting systems, restorative justice programs. The room buzzed with cautious hope. Amira, for the first time, was asked to speak not as a victim, but as a leader. She stepped up slowly, breath-steady palms sweaty against the mic. I didn't flip Logan because I wanted to hurt him. I did it because I had no other choice. But what we do now, how we treat each other from here on, that's what will define us. She paused. We can be better. Not because someone forced us, but because we choose to be. The gym erupted in applause. That week, something remarkable unfolded. Students who had never spoken to Amira approached her with quiet thanks. Teachers who'd once mispronounced her name now asked her opinion in class. The lunch table that once sat empty now buzzed with laughter, questioned stories. Ava and Marcus started drafting a handbook for the council. Sarah helped organize workshops on bystander intervention and the dojo pin. It wasn't just hers anymore. Dozens of students wore replica symbols of solidarity, but not everyone was celebrating. On Thursday, Amira received a legal notice. Patricia Morse again. We are proceeding with civil litigation, it read. You are being named personally in damages. The Whitmore family will not rest until justice is served. Amira stared at the letter, the weight of it heavier than any trophy she'd ever earned. She felt her throat tighten, the old fear creeping in. But her mother, reading over her shoulder, whispered, "Let them come. We'll answer with truth." The next day, Miss Rodriguez called a meeting. In attendance, Amira, her mother, Marcus's brother, the civil rights attorney, and 3 other alumni. Each had stories of Logan. Each had been silenced, ignored, overlooked. "Let's build the case," said the attorney. Not just to defend Amira, but to expose the system that protected Logan for years. Amira looked at the stack of files before her, the names, the testimonies. It was bigger than her now. It always had been. But for the first time, she felt ready to carry it. She straightened her back, her fingers brushing the dojo pin. Then let's get to work. You're being sued for $250,000 in emotional and reputational damages. The words hit harder than any punch Amira had ever taken. Her mother's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the envelope, the official seal glaring back at them from the kitchen table, like a threat wrapped in gold. The Whitmores weren't bluffing. This was war. And Amira. She was done hiding. Marcus's brother, David Chin, moved quickly. By Monday morning, they had a war room set up in the back of Crestwood's community library. Laptops print out sworn statements. A quiet army of alumni and students filled the space with nervous energy and sharp focus. They're counting on silence, David said, pointing to the complaint. But we're going to answer with everything they didn't expect: truth, evidence, and numbers. Amira's role wasn't just symbolic. She combed through student statements, cross-referencing incidents with security footage and yearbooks. A pattern emerged. Logan's reign of terror went back 4 years. Detentions that vanished, complaints, ignored a coach who discouraged distractions. It was bigger than bullying. It was a system that had trained everyone to look the other way. Crestwood didn't just fail, Amira Sarah said during one late-night meeting. It failed all of us. The team compiled everything into a public dossier titled The Whitmore Files. They didn't release it immediately. Timing mattered, and when they did, it would hit like a thunderclap. But the Whitmores struck first. 3 days before the planned release, a media blitz swept through town. Paid articles, slick videos, even a local radio interview with Logan's father, painting Amira as an unstable teen with a history of violence. Her dojo training was framed as a red flag, not a badge of discipline. She concealed her abilities, Mr. Whitmore said gravely. This wasn't self-defense. It was premeditated aggression. The smear campaign worked, for a moment. At school, whispers returned. Some teachers avoided eye contact. One even asked if she'd be taking a break from martial arts for everyone's safety. Amira swallowed her anger, but the sting of betrayal sat deep in her chest. The dojo pin on her backpack felt heavier, like a target. That Friday, she nearly broke. In the empty hallway outside the counselor's office, Amira sat down her back against the cool lockers, fighting the weight pressing in on her chest. Was she really strong enough for this? A voice broke the silence. Dojo girl, right. She looked up to see Kayla, a freshman who barely spoke in class, holding out a crumpled note. Amira opened it slowly. Inside were 5 simple words. He bullied me too. K. That moment snapped something into place. This wasn't about lawsuits or public opinion. It was about kids like Kayla, still scared, still silent. Amira stood. Monday morning, the Whitmore files went live. Uploaded to the school website, emailed to local media, shared by dozens of alumni. Names were redacted, but the stories were raw, detailed, undeniable. Within hours, miniature Whitmore cover-up began trending statewide. News vans parked outside Crestwood. Journalists flooded the front office. And when the school board called an emergency press conference, Amira, backed by David Chin, and a coalition of parents showed up uninvited with proof. We have video testimony patterns of misconduct spanning years, David said, holding up a thick binder. You can ignore it, or you can fix it. The superintendent paled. By the end of the week, the district announced an independent investigation. The coach resigned. The vice principal was placed on administrative leave, and the Whitmores. Their lawsuit stalled in discovery, buried under motions and counterclaims. But the real victory wasn't legal. That Friday, Amira walked into homeroom to find something taped to her desk, a hand-drawn version of the dojo pin, surrounded by dozens of tiny signatures. Underneath a note, "You stood for us. Now we stand with you." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked around the room. Students met her gaze not with pity or fear, but pride. And she realized the battle wasn't over. But, for the first time, she wasn't fighting alone. "Your daughter is a danger to the community," Patricia Whitmore snapped, slamming a stack of glossy court documents onto the principal's desk. "And, if the school won't act, the state will." That was how the week began, with headlines, threats, and a storm of media buzz fed by the Whitmore family's influence and rage. Logan's confession had rocked their image, and now they were fighting back viciously. The lawsuit ballooned into a county-level investigation. The family's lawyers painted Amira as a weaponized minor, a danger who exploited her martial arts skills to dominate peers. The Whitmores pushed for her expulsion, public apology, and even juvenile detention. Amira sat at the center of the storm, watching the world tilt around her. She'd been braced for the attacks, but not the silence. For the first time in weeks, classmates walked past without nods. Teachers avoided eye contact. Even the administration, once warm, now spoke in legal terms and press-safe phrases. It wasn't betrayal. It was fear. The Whitmores had stirred the ghosts of every student's college recommendation letter, every parent's scholarship fund. Amira had sparked a fire, but now people feared the smoke would choke them. At home, her mom reviewed documents late into the night with Marcus's brother. "They're trying to break you not in court, but before it even begins," she said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "But they don't know you, baby. You don't crack." Amira nodded silently, gripping the dojo badge Master Kim had sent in a letter along with a note. True strength is not loud. It holds firm in the quiet. When Monday arrived, so did the district, hearing an emergency session packed with board members, lawyers, and media. Amira stood alone at the podium while a lawyer dissected her actions in sanitized legalese. She did not merely defend herself. She humiliated a fellow student with premeditated physical violence, the woman intoned. Her training transforms her into a threat, not just a peer. Amira inhaled. "May I speak?" she asked. Reluctant nods followed, and then in a voice calm and clear, she told the room everything. The bruises, the humiliation, the silence, the system that made her invisibility necessary until the moment it demanded she disappear again. "I didn't want to fight," she ended, "but I will not apologize for surviving." A hush swept through the chamber, but just as Principal Harris rose to defend her, a booming voice cut through the tension. Then let me add my voice to hers. Logan stepped into the room, a camera crew trailing behind him. His mother's face blanched. My name is Logan Whitmore, and I was the bully. Not Amira. Me. Gasps erupted. Logan handed the board a folder. Everything I said in my confession, every incident, every cover-up, dates, names, locations. Verified. You can't silence the truth just because you're uncomfortable with who it protects. Chaos followed, but amid it, Amira felt something shift. Not just in the room, but in the balance of power itself. Outside, a crowd had gathered students, parents, alumni, wearing white shirts with the dojo badge printed over their hearts. Not with slogans, just presence, just unity, just resistance. And as the board moved to recess, one of the members whispered to another, "We underestimated her." But the moment wasn't over. That night, while scrolling through her messages, Amira found a video anonymously sent. Grainy security footage from weeks ago, Patricia Whitmore in the principal's office shredding incident reports, replacing a student complaint file. The timestamp was damning. Amira stared at the screen, her breath catching. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a reckoning for the entire system. She hit play again, heart pounding, and whispered, "Game on." You're not invisible anymore, Amira, and that terrifies them. It was Ms. Alvarez's quiet voice after the court verdict that echoed in Amira's mind as she stood beneath the gym's harsh lights on graduation day. The entire auditorium buzzed with energy, yet for the first time in years, Amira didn't shrink from the crowd. She faced it head on, spine, tall eyes, steady. Her name echoed across the speakers, Amira Sullivan followed by a roar of applause that wasn't just loud, it was visceral. Her mother stood in the front row, weeping freely, clutching the old dojo badge now pinned to her purse. Beside her, Master Kim beamed with quiet pride. What started as a self-defense moment had become a tidal wave. The board had dropped the lawsuit. Logan had taken the witness stand, his testimony demolishing every lie his father had crafted. The investigation into his mother's role in covering up abuse had led to her resignation. And Ridgeview High wasn't the same anymore. A new anti-bullying protocol, named the Amira Doctrine, was being adopted statewide. It wasn't just policy, it was culture. But the real story wasn't in the headlines. It was in the quiet changes, the way teachers watched more carefully, how students intervened when they saw cruelty, and how those once silenced now spoke up. The Self-Defense and Integrity Club had grown to over 80 members. Amira didn't lead it alone anymore. Sarah taught the verbal de-escalation module. Marcus hosted workshops on student rights and advocacy. Even Logan came once sharing his story not as redemption, but as warning. And he listened far more than he spoke. I thought power was being feared, he told the group, but it's actually being respected. And respect doesn't come from making others small. The video of his speech went viral, but Amira never watched it. She didn't need to. Her battle hadn't been for the world to see, it had been for herself, and for every student who thought staying silent was safer than being seen. That was the scar the system had left her with, and she had turned it into a badge of honor. As she crossed the stage, she saw Principal Reynolds nod to her eyes, glassy. She hadn't expected forgiveness from those who had once ignored injustice, but change wasn't about revenge. It was about replacing silence with accountability. Outside the auditorium, a line had formed, not for photos, but to thank her. Younger students, parents, teachers. Even the custodian who once found her ruined textbooks helped adjust her sash. "You made this school safer," he whispered. Later that night at the celebration barbecue, Marcus raised a toast. To the girl who flipped a system and landed on her feet. Laughter clinks of soda cans, the smell of grilled corn in the air. Sarah slipped Amira a card inside a single sentence. "Thank you for fighting when I couldn't." Amira placed it next to the dojo badge on her nightstand that evening. The world hadn't fully changed. Racism still existed. Power still protected the cruel. But for one high school in one corner of America, The ground had shifted, and that mattered. She whispered to her reflection in the dark, just like on that first morning. Never start a fight, but always know how to end one. Then she smiled, because for once the fight was over, and she had won not just justice, but a future.